Thanks for joining us today. Hank is the Chief Regulatory and Commercialization Officer with Prilenia. At this position, Hank plays a critical role in defining the regulatory pathway for seeking global approvals and to support the company as it advances towards its end goal of patients having access to effective and safe therapies. Hank is a pharmacist with over 25 years experience in the pharmaceutical industry for both medicinal products and medicinal devices. He is an experienced leader and has a proven track record in developing and bringing to market products for rare diseases. In April 1999, Hank joined Genzyme in regulatory affairs. His last position was head of regulatory strategy for EMEA and JPAC. In this role, Hank was part of development and commercialization of various rare disease products for Genzyme and Sanofi Genzyme. Many of these products were first approvals of a treatment for rare diseases. In November 2014, Hank became VP head of rare neurology at Sanofi Genzyme and responsible for the area of rare neurology, which was built around the Pompe franchise. In this role, he was responsible for driving growth and expansion of Sanofi Genzyme's presence in rare neurology. This role oversaw the global marketing and commercial support for approved products, as well as products in development. As of early 2017, he had a similar role for rare nephrology as global head of rare nephrological diseases, including the Fabry franchise. So thank you so much, Hank, for joining us today. And if you'd like to begin sharing your screen.
Let me start sharing the screen. And first of all, thank you very much, Help for HD, for inviting me today. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Tell me if you can see the slides.
Yes.
And now I have to go back up. So first of all, Katie, Katrina, Help for HD, thank you very much for inviting me today to speak on behalf of Prilenia and about Pridopidine. And Melissa, thank you for the introduction. I'm going to make it very simple for you for the future. I think the easiest way to describe a lot of what I've been doing is that I'm striving for patient access in a sustainable and global manner, especially in rare diseases that have no effective treatments. So I prefer to be in diseases where there is nothing, like Huntington, rather than in a disease where there are already maybe 4 or 5 or even more treatments available. It's a very dynamic and interesting field to play in. So let's talk a little bit more about Prilenia and Pridopidine. Without giving away too much at the beginning, we are getting into very exciting times. And last time when I spoke, I talked about looking back, looking forward. This time I'll only look forward. And I'll talk a little bit about Proof HD, the ongoing trial, but I will also talk a little bit about some of the things we are planning to do in the nearby future. I'm not going to go into details on Huntington's disease. You all know extremely well how relentlessly progressive and ultimately fatal this disease is. So no need to go into that. Just wanted to go a little bit about the natural course of Huntington progression. And what you will see on this slide is what everybody always talks about, that in the prodromal manifest patients, you see the motor impairments, the cognitive impairment, dementia, and chorea. What we are really interested in is functional capacity. So we are looking at the functional capacity in the form of, the independence of patients. And why is that so important? One of the sentences that stuck in my head and has been is when speaking to one of the patients, a man in this case, he said to me, I have the disease, I will get worse. I have a daughter that is pregnant and I want to have a meaningful relationship with my grandchild. And I think it says a lot about what patients want. Patients really are looking for maintaining quality of life, ability to work, to be independent, dress themselves, eat themselves. And the best way to do that is by looking at functional capacity. And here you see some of the things that we heard from patients. Patients emphasize the burden that Huntington leaves on them in the inability to perform daily activities, that they become more and more dependent on others. And if you then look at what scale is available to test for this, that is the total functional capacity scale. And there was a meeting in 2015, the Voice of the Patient, where Huntington disease patients and caregivers had this discussion with FDA. and FDA subsequently has been accepting this scale, total functional capacity, as an endpoint for studies in Huntington. So you will and have heard about this endpoint from many companies. So what does it test? It's a 5 domains scale. It looks at occupation, it looks at finances, it looks at domestic chores, it looks at activities of daily living and care level. And it looks in the form of, let's take occupation, whether you're able to work in a normal way, whether you are having a reduced capacity, marginal work only, or unable. And it is rated by your physician. The same is happening for finances, for domestic chores, activities of daily living, and the care level you need. And if you would count all of these together, it is a scale that ranges from 0 to 13. So what is Pridopidine? Pridopidine is an investigational drug that is currently being tested in clinical trials for both Huntington and ALS. It is an oral small molecule that is administered twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. And its activity is working on the sigma-1 receptor. The sigma-1 receptor is very much present in your brain, in areas like the brainstem, the basal ganglia, the cortex, which are very relevant for Huntington and other neurodegenerative diseases. So let's go back to what is Pridopidine. It's an investigational drug currently being studied in Huntington and ALS, and it specifically binds to a receptor called the sigma-1 receptor. This sigma-1 receptor is very present in the brain, the ganglia, the basal ganglia and cortex, so areas very relevant for Huntington disease. In clinical studies previously conducted, it has shown to be very well tolerated and safe, and I'll go into that a little bit more. And the side effect that we have seen is generally comparable to placebo. The drug may show maintenance of total functional capacity, and I'll show you some of the data of PRIDE-HD later that have led us to the design of PROVE-HD. And we have some data suggesting that it may be a long-term effect, as we have some data supporting a 5-year effect of the drug. Beyond that, we haven't studied. So why is a small molecule so important? It is in many ways something that you can prefer in diseases. And what are the unique properties of a small molecule like Pridopidine? You can administer it orally, so you don't have to go for an intrathecal or a lumbar puncture. It's very easy to administer. You can do it at home. It has shown that it penetrates into the brain. It easily accesses the targets in the cells that we would like to target. It has a relative short half-life, and what that means is that if after you take it, within about 10 hours, half of the amount is already gone. So in 2.5 days, you would be totally without any of the remaining product, where if you may remember, some products that are more like oligonucleotides can stay for up to 6 months in your body. Generally, these oral small molecules are chemically manufactured and are less complex than, for example, a biological molecule, and generally have a long shelf life, and you can basically store them at room temperature, which also facilitates easy distribution. Now, I think I'm not able, yeah. So one of the most important aspects was this mechanism of action. Originally, people thought that Pridopidine worked through dopamine in the brain, but we demonstrated it works on the sigma-1 receptor. And what we did to confirm that is we used healthy volunteers. And what you see here on this slide is how we confirmed it. What we did is we gave radioactively labeled, and that sounds very nasty, but it is needed in a very low safe amount to show on what they call imaging, a PET scan in this case, what happens. And what on the top right, if you give this radioactive labeled fluspidine, on the top right, the green and yellow lighting, showing that fluspidine binds to the sigma-1 receptor. We then repeated this experiment with one difference. We first gave these healthy volunteers Pridopidine at the same dose of the 45 mg twice a day that we use for Huntington and ALS in the clinical studies. And at the bottom, you see what happened. There was hardly any of the green and yellow lighting coming because Pridopidine had bound to the sigma-1 receptor, and the sigma-1 receptor was not available for fluspidine binding. And this showed that 90 to 95% of the sigma-1 receptor was bound by pridopidine. So a very neat way to confirm in humans that our mechanism of action is indeed what we expect. Why is that so important? Because by activating the sigma-1 receptor, you enable neuroprotective properties. And those are, for example, that the stress of cells is reduced, neuroinflammation is reduced, and you just heard that in the previous presentation from Annexon as well on how important that is. But also toxic proteins are cleared, that is improved, energy production is improved, the connection between neuronal cells is improved, and protective factors that help the brain are increased. So various neuroprotective properties that are relevant in these diseases. I mentioned to you safety. We have a significant clinical experience with pridopidine. Over 1,300 patients have had the product. Over 1,000 at the 45 mg twice a day that we use for Huntington and ALS. And we have data for up to 5 years. And as I mentioned before, the side effect in clinical trials has shown to be comparable to placebo. And if you look to what are the most common adverse events that we have seen, then we talk about things like nausea, headache, dizziness, diarrhea, cold-like symptoms. And you will see in purple placebo and in blue pridopidine arm, and you will appreciate that in most of these, that's a very similar amounts that basically show that the product has a safety profile comparable to placebo. So what is PROOF-HD? PROOF-HD is our ongoing phase 3 study. It is designed to replicate data from previous trials that showed the beneficial effect of pridopidine on total functional capacity. So we are back at PROOF-HD, the ongoing phase 3 study, randomized, double-blind, controlled, set up to evaluate the safety and efficacy. And we are using data from prior studies to confirm an effect on total functional capacity. The study is fully enrolled. The investigators, we have sites in Europe, North America, including Canada and the US, 58 sites in total, 25 US, 4 in Canada, and the others in Europe in various countries. And on this slide, you see the principal investigators. So on North America, Dr. Andrew Fagan, HSG, Sandra Kostic. On the European side, Dr. Ralph Railman and Ann Rosser. So what was the important finding that we found? In PRIDE-HD, we found that at the 45 mg twice a day dose after 1 year, that the placebo patients lost about a bit more than -1 on a scale of 0 to 13 of TFC, and the treated patients basically maintained stable. They did not lose any functional capacity in the duration of the study. And this is the first time ever that this was shown by any compound. So very encouraging and led to the design of the current study. And that's why the primary endpoint is also total functional capacity. It's a phase 3 double-blind, 2 arms. We compare placebo versus pridopidine 45 mg twice a day. The study was fully enrolled in October 2021, and we will test functional capacity at week 65. Patients who have completed the double-blind are all eligible to go into an open-label extension study, and many have already done so. So this was the study design. This was the start, which was October 2020. And you can see the various visits, the weeks. And I can tell you that we are very close to where I'm now pointing at, where you see that flag, the finish flag, the end of the study. And let me try to explain that a little bit more. End of January, we had the last patient that came to the clinic for the 65-week primary endpoint assessment. There is a safety window and a follow-up call that takes about 30 days. So the last patient, last visit for the study is expected to happen somewhere in, I hope, Rare Disease Day, 28th of February, but it may be early March, so in the next week. Of the patients that we have seen so far, the vast majority, over 98% of eligible patients, have elected to move into the open label extension. So here is the news. We basically have all the data coming in more and more for the patients. The last patient has been in the clinic for week 65. Patients are enrolling in the open label extension, and we are expecting the last patient last visit and then a database close in the coming weeks, and potential results would be around the end of April. I will caution and I will keep reminding everybody that while we are very encouraged and very pleased to see where we are and that we are extremely happy with the community, how things have gone, we have to keep in mind that phase 3 studies in rare diseases have a 60% success rate, but a 60% success rate also means a 40% chance of not making it. So I do want to manage expectations about a successful outcome. Everything we can do and we could do, we have done together with the community to get to where we are, and we are crossing our fingers for the coming months. What is important and what I want to really end on this, in the case of positive proof HD data, we have plans for subsequent studies in Huntington. You all heard, I think it's 2 weeks ago, the patient listening meeting that Help for HD had with the FDA. And the unmet need for juvenile Huntington is clearly understood. And we also, as part of our plans for global submission, had to talk to the European authorities with regards to what they call a pediatric investigation plan. We have reached agreement with them on the design of a pediatric study. There is still some discussion ongoing. And we have also started discussions with FDA to use that same study for the US. The plan would be to start such a pediatric juvenile study in patients probably in the age of 2 to 17, post positive proof HD data. And in the same way, we also heard patients with prodromal HD. So with signs and symptoms, but not yet manifest, probably about 5 to 7 years prior to being manifest, who are very keen to get also in studies. And we are also working on designing a study in prodromal HD. So very exciting, very close to results. Late April, early May, and the patients have enrolled into the OLE. And in case of positive data, we might also start seeing some work towards juvenile HD studies and prodromal HD studies. And with that, I would really like to thank all the patients, caregivers, and anybody who have helped with Proof HD and the enrollment. The community has been big in its support. And let's cross our fingers for the coming months.
Thank you so much, Hank. I know everyone is watching this so very close, and thank you for continuing to come on and doing updates for us. It's very important for our community to keep being able to hear from you. So we are thankful for everyone at Prilenia for saying yes every time we ask you guys to come on. So thank you.
I'm very happy to do that. Yeah, I was taught by one of my old bosses, Henry Temir, that if it's good for the patient, it is good for the business. And I think that is the way to look at this in many ways. And sharing where we are and what we plan to achieve with patients, to me, is one of the most important aspects.
Yeah.